We begin our walk on Barker Lane, a street whose name is a direct, tangible link to the medieval trades that once dominated this section of York. Walk a few paces down the lane. Notice how quiet, narrow, and utilitarian this street feels compared to the grand thoroughfare of Micklegate just behind us. This difference is key to understanding its history. Barker Lane is a perfect example of a medieval back lane. All the wealthy burgage plots, the narrow strips of land that fronted Micklegate stretched all the way back to here. This meant Barker Lane was where the work happened. The name Barker is derived from the Old English word for a tanner, someone who stripped bark to use in the tanning process. While tanning often took place outside the city walls due to the smell, the name reflects a service or trade function. As we continue, imagine this lane not as a quiet passageway, but as a place of industry, noise, and smell. Archaeological evidence has shown that this area was a hub of intensive manufacturing from the 13th century onwards. Excavations have revealed the remains of a complex of workshops used for metalworking and founding. They discovered deposits of clay mold fragments and casting debris, indicating that workers here were pouring metal to make domestic vessels like cauldrons and pots for the citizens of York. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the industrial function shifted. The metalworking furnaces were replaced by ovens, and the production of foundry waste stopped. The lane's function changed to a bakery, a usage that gave rise to one of its older alternative names, Baker's Lane. The buildings we see today, though often restored or rebuilt, stand on the same narrow footprints that housed these vital trades, the founding, the baking, and perhaps even the early activities of a tanner. Look up at the facades along the lane. Many of the buildings here are unassuming, but they tell a story of constant adaptation. Historically, many structures on lanes like this were simple timber-framed, half-timbered houses and workshops. Records from the early 1900s show drawings of some classic timber-framed houses here that were sadly demolished to make way for warehousing. The surviving buildings, often faced in brick, typically date from the 18th and 19th centuries, built to replace the decaying medieval structures. One record mentions a property on Barker Lane, once owned by a baker on Micklegate, being demolished in 1911 to build a warehouse. This turnover from housing to light industrial use is a common theme in the history of back lanes as the city modernized. The simple, robust quality of the architecture on Barker Lane reflects its role: practical, not showy. It was built to support the people and businesses of the grand street nearby. As we approach the far end of the lane, the historical context shifts dramatically. The large, modern developments and the looming structures near the railway station mark the point where the medieval backplot meets the 19th century railway hub. This end of the lane gives you a clear view of the contrast between old and New York. The old railway offices, now the beautifully restored West offices, overlook this spot. It was here that the industrial power of the railway began to overshadow the traditional trades of the medieval lanes. The arrival of the railway led to massive redevelopment in this area, Toft Green Itana Row, which squeezed and defined the final stretch of Barker Lane. The lane effectively became a conduit linking the ancient city centre to the new powerhouse of transportation. We begin this leg of the walk on Micklegate, the Great Street, a name that speaks to its importance since the Viking era. Right here, near our starting point, lies the hidden heart of medieval religious power on this side of the river. Look for the gateway and lane that lead into the churchyard of Holy Trinity Church, Micklegate. This is not just a parish church, it is a surviving fragment of a massive medieval monastery. The site of Holy Trinity was so important it was listed in the Domesday Book of 1086 as one of the 5 great churches of the north, alongside York Minster and Beverley Minster. Around 1089, it was refounded as a Benedictine priory, known as Micklegate Priory. At its height, the priory precinct, including workshops, cloisters, gardens, and fish ponds, spanned a huge area, defining the landscape around us. Imagine this: the famous York mystery plays would traditionally gather and set off from the priory courtyard right here. This street would have been filled with actors, wagons, and townspeople for the great procession. The church we see today is only the nave of the former priory church. Following the dissolution of the monasteries in 1538, much of the rest of the complex, including the chancel and central tower, was allowed to decay or was dismantled. As we continue down Micklegate, walking towards the River Ouse, Note the architectural rhythm. You are walking a street that was the principal home to York's elite for centuries. Micklegate was always a street of mixed character, boasting both mansions of minor nobility and the substantial houses of wealthy merchants and aldermen. Observe the elegant Georgian townhouses. Their formal brick fronts and large windows date from the 18th century. Many earlier, timber-framed medieval buildings were given these fashionable new facades to keep up appearances, even as York's trade began to stagnate. One example near the Holy Trinity entrance, now a solicitor's office, was one Scarforth house, built in 1757, a classic example of the wealth on display here. Look across the street to the point where St. Martin's Lane meets Micklegate. The church that stood here, St. Martin cum Gregory, played a key civic role. In front of St. Martin's Church, the butter market was historically held. This was the staple market for butter from all across the north of England, underscoring Micklegate's commercial importance as the main route from the countryside. The church tower itself was badly damaged by bombing during the Baedeker raids of World War II, a sobering reminder that even York's ancient centre was not immune to the devastation of the 20th century. Continue walking downhill. The closer we get to the river, the older and narrower the properties tend to become, reflecting the intense competition for space near the docks. Our walk ends at the junction with North Street, right near the Ouse Bridge. The ground under our feet here has been occupied since Roman times. The Roman road from Tadcaster ran through this area, heading towards a crossing point of the Ouse. Look down North Street. It was a vital link to the quayside and river traffic. This area bustled with activity, ships unloading, goods being weighed, and merchants trading. The proximity to the river made this end of Micklegate intensely valuable. And finally, right on the corner, stands the former church of St. John the Evangelist, now converted into a commercial venue. This building with its squat, distinctive brick and timber frame tower, added in 1684, marks the end of the Great Street and the final transition onto the bridge to cross the River Ouse. We are now standing on Ouse Bridge, a site that has been the most important river crossing in York for over 1,000 years, a vital link that binds the Roman and medieval city together. The Romans built the first crossing, likely an unadorned bridge of stone or wood, further upstream near the Roman headquarters. However, the Vikings, who called York Jorvik, needed a crossing that suited their bustling river port. They built a new wooden bridge approximately here, a few hundred yards downstream from the Roman crossing, establishing the permanent line of trade we stand on today. The current bridge structure, completed in 1821, is the fourth major bridge on this spot, a testament to the river's power and the city's constant need to cross it. The most famous disaster of the bridge's history occurred here in 1154. The wooden Viking bridge had been replaced, or heavily repaired. A huge crowd of citizens, celebrating the return of Archbishop William Fitzherbert, later St. William of York, gathered on the bridge to greet him. The weight was too much. The wooden structure collapsed, sending hundreds of people tumbling into the River Ouse. According to legend, William, despite being a controversial archbishop, remained calm and prayed for the people, and miraculously, no one was drowned. This event led to his eventual canonization and cemented the bridge's religious significance. The stone replacement that followed this disaster housed St. William's Chapel right on the bridge itself. The bridge we stand on now was completed in 1821, designed by Peter Atkinson the Younger. Its elegant, classical style, with 5 wide arches, was a masterpiece of Georgian engineering, designed to accommodate carriages and, later, trams. The high, wide arches were specifically designed to allow the Ouse to flow freely, avoiding the disastrous flooding that caused the collapse of the 1564 bridge, which was a major catastrophe that claimed houses and lives. Today, the bridge is listed for its historical and architectural importance. It may look like a simple stone crossing, but it carries the late history of a Roman crossing, a Viking trading spot, a site of religious miracle and execution, and the centuries-long seat of the city's government.